Hi everyone, this is Jason Burack of Wall Street from Main Street and independent financial journalist and managing editor of The News Doctor's Eric Dubin. Welcome back for another Welcome to Dystopia episode. This is episode number 31. Now, Eric, I'm looking at the Kitco website right now, and we have gold at around $11.95, almost $1,200 again. We have silver, silver's above 16 strongly, 1674 silver. So thank God it's not way below 16. Do you think gold and silver are trying to put in a strong bottom, or do you think we're going to start testing the lows again?
Well, you know where I stand on gold and silver in the precious metals market in the context of January, and where we were around December 20th to 22nd or so. I forget exactly because I don't have the chart right in front of me, but right before Christmas, I think we had bottomed, and we're just going through the process of moving back up, and had a pretty decent couple of days in the early start of January, and then, as is usually the case when you have the shift that comes with a new year and monies get reallocated to different target categories by the professional investors, the institutional sect, combined with the aftermath of tax loss selling going out the window and no longer being an issue because of the turn of the year, and individual investors and speculators and all of the various people that are beginning to move back into the sector because, in fact, from a psychological point of view, smart money's aware of all these kind of dynamics too, so a lot of the times they'll just kind of sit on their hands through the lion's share of the trading that goes on through December, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, that kind of pattern is frequently what we see, and that, in fact, is what we saw this last December, and it's playing out as, in fact, I've talked about on this very show and other places too. And it's not a surprise to see that we are seeing precious metals respond well. This morning in the Asian trade was really interesting because, in particular, the Japanese yen started going bonkers against the dollar and depreciating. It went down like 1.6 or so in terms of this spread from peak to trough, and then kind of leveled out a bit. But that's a really, really big move for the Japanese yen. And it gets back to what you and I have talked about many a time about how frequently the central bankers, when they're trying to manage markets and manage asset prices to elevate them, and they just manipulate everything these days. And when you manipulate something for so long and it gets so distorted, i.e. bond markets or the equity markets being an artificial creature because of the low interest rate paradigm being able to support all manner of liquidity creation, even from outright more than $1 trillion worth of stock buybacks from corporate treasuries that borrowed money at next to nothing, dumping it into their own stocks when they purchase. I mean, over $1 trillion in the last couple of years. So in the big picture sense, I think that we see central bankers, a theme that we like to hit many a time, basically just trying to continue to manage manipulation for the sake of managing their past manipulations disasters. And this morning looked a lot like that. I mean, I can't prove any of this, but having watched markets for over 25 years and seeing what currencies have been doing lately, and it's something that we've talked a lot about, and you've talked a lot about with all your other guests on Wall Street for Main Street's standard podcasts, about just how the FX market in particular is really revealing how totally insane the rest of the markets are. And it sure looked to me like there's central bank intervention, even the day that we're recording today on January 12th. And we saw really big moves in Japanese yen declining, and that has, at least in recent times, been a really strong positive for gold. So we saw that in the conjunction with a lot of fireworks as well in U.S. equities, and the U.S. dollar was moving well against the British pound. So that those things are very gold positive, but then all of a sudden the yen's decline stopped, and central bankers looked like they were intervening. And who knows? Maybe that was part of what was immediately thereafter pressuring precious metals, because that's exactly when the second half of, or latter portion of today's trading saw the rally squelched. And now we're kind of treading water, or even indicators that tell me where speculator sentiment is when it comes to the precious metals sector. Like, for example, in equities, JNUG is a wonderful benchmark that I use that gives a looking glass into how speculators think. And it was up, I'm doing this only by memory at the moment, so I don't have a chart in front of me, but it was up like 7% or so today, and that closed down. And silver was pressured down quite a bit as well, too, and that is also a sentiment indicator for, the very short term. So we went from a whole heck of a lot of excitement as people were pricing in today continued risk of monetary craziness and that underlying rot within the banking establishment, and particularly in Europe that we've spoken about many, many a time, combined with a lot of people now that are thinking that inflation expectations are going to start accelerating because of the infrastructure spend, and on and on. The whole backdrop is very precious metals friendly, and there was no particular reason why we should have seen the rally just kind of roll over and die today. And, maybe it's a pretty good indication of where we are when it comes to the slop that we have to slog through when fundamentals get crushed by manipulation periodically, and it does happen periodically. But in the longer term, I think we're in a longer term bull market, and intermediate term as well, and even January. I think we're going to be higher in January, still further out. It's just that we have these periods where things just tread water, and silver tried to get over 17 today, and as soon as it got really close to that, boom, taken down. Well, what else is new? But this is a long-term bull market, and we're going a heck of a lot higher in 2017.
Well, as long as central bankers keep trying to competitively devalue their digital fiat, debt-based fiat currencies, and change exchange rates and manipulate them, and then the high-frequency traders piggyback those trades with the central bankers going in there. One of the main themes, I think, for 2017 will be huge moves up and down in currency exchange rates in many different currencies. So, in the past, a 1 or 2% move in the currency markets on an exchange rate for one whole year was a big deal. And you just gave an example, Eric, that happened in one day. Well, shorter than one day, basically. So, this is going to be confusing and difficult for most people. If you're a day trader or an options trader, you're a hedge fund guy, it's going to be fun for you. You're going to be able to make extra money off this volatility. If you're a longer term investor and you're not equipped to dealing with things like that, it's going to be difficult. But, during that gold correction that we've had for really since September and October of 2016, what gold got down to, 1120, 1130-ish? Yeah, about there. Yeah, so gold got down to around there. I mean, we had record corresponding buying from the Shanghai Gold Exchange at those levels. The November 2016 buying for the Shanghai Gold Exchange was the largest in 1 month ever that we've ever seen. So that amount of buying, so when the Chinese buyer, which normally doesn't chase prices higher, they had been waiting for a correction, and when gold finally got down and was cheap again, you saw that more prudent Chinese buyer. Not every Chinese buyer is prudent, but the Chinese buyer who is more prudent, who waits to buy on dips and corrections, they came in and bought with hand over fist at those levels. And
it's actually worth pointing out just a cultural difference too, because to Chinese credit, they are actually reasonably savvy when it comes to their purchasing habits for precious metals, because they do tend to buy dips, whereas North American buyers tend to love to chase prices that are going up.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's also kind of weird, too, that they're that way because they think differently about precious metals, because when it comes to stocks, they chase momentum, and they go, even grannies and so forth open up brokerage accounts by the millions in China and buy stocks when it's going up, and they go berserk.
The Chinese really love to gamble. Yeah, the Chinese love to gamble, Eric. I mean, they bet on the lottery.
That's what it is. They think of precious metals not as a gamble, and it's not quite the same. But when they think about stocks, they just go absolutely bonkers. Or Bitcoin even.
Or going to vacation in Macau.
Right.
Yeah, the gambling casinos in Macau they were, last time I checked, doing record business. So, I think it's larger now than Las Vegas. I think the business that Macau does, that changed over in the last couple of years. I think they do more gambling business now than Las Vegas does every year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also, Chinese tourists going to other casinos in other parts of Asia. But yeah, the Chinese love to gamble, but all of their investments aren't gambling per se. So that purchase with the Shanghai Gold Exchange, that was the largest one, despite, record years of purchases on the Shanghai Gold Exchange from the last couple years. So the Chinese buyer wasn't really participating nearly as much in 2016 when the paper price of gold and silver were rallying as they had in the past. So they had been waiting for another buying opportunity, and they got it towards the end of 2016. So, you and me have been talking about this for a while on our shows, that anytime there was a major correction in the paper price, we thought that either there was going to be certain central bank buying from Russia, China, etc., or there was going to be major physical demand of precious metal, gold and silver, from private buyers in China, India, etc., who are waiting for dips and they know the price is manipulated. They're aware of how the market really functions, and they don't want to chase the price higher.
Yeah, and also China's got a problem now in the last 2 months in particular with acceleration of capital flight.
Oh yeah.
So there's been a lot of impetus for Chinese and corporations in China, individuals. It's not just the government, but a lot of people in China are buying gold. They're flocking into Bitcoin.
Well, the government's
They're trying to get out of the currency because their currency is going to devalue by at least probably another, very conservatively estimating, saying 10% more in 2017. And they'll probably be forced to actually do a one-time devaluation. I wouldn't be surprised if that's going to come in the second half of this year.
Hedge fund manager Kyle Bass, Eric, is saying at least 20%. He's saying maybe even 30% devaluation. He says they don't want to do it. He said they know it's bad, but they're going to have to do it as basically a bailout to help write off some of those loans. They have liquidity problems in their banking system. 90% of their banks, by the way, guys, are owned by their government. So they're not. This is not a free market in Chinese banks. This is a corrupt government banking system there, and they've given out bad loans to a lot of municipalities who can't pay back the loans. This is central planning, the inefficiencies of central planning. But, Eric, you brought up capital controls. The private sector is going to react a certain way to that. That's government creating unintended consequences there with the private sector. Even if you're not a libertarian or Austrian school or anything like that, you have common sense. If you're a successful Chinese businessman or a Chinese saver and you have a lot of cash in the bank and you see that the government has just devalued the RMB by 6%, we had a 6% devaluation in the RMB in only a couple days, a couple months ago, you're going to panic. So you're not going to keep all your cash in the bank there. You're going to get worried they're going to do it again. So that's why things like you said, like precious metals, Bitcoin, and then we have, this is a cat and mouse game, Eric. So the governments and the people are going to be going back and forth. So we had a lot of Chinese buyers who had never bought Bitcoin before go into Bitcoin on top of, extra demand in India from their government up to craziness with the demonetization scheme, and Venezuela and other parts of Latin America. And now we have the Chinese government trying to come out with their own press releases saying that these Bitcoin exchanges are not safe. There's flaws in the Bitcoin currency. People in China shouldn't buy Bitcoin, and that's knocked the price back down. And I was getting emails and comments on YouTube from people when the Bitcoin price was above gold again, or getting there, when the Bitcoin price hit 1100 and it was starting to go parabolic, that the next Bitcoin correction wouldn't occur till 3000. Well, look, governments have stepped in.
Yeah, well, I love the technology, and cryptocurrencies are beautiful, and Bitcoin is particularly elegant in a lot of different ways. But the reality, as I've been saying for years, and much to the consternation of my libertarian friends, governments are going to kick the crap out of Bitcoin when Bitcoin, or at least cause people a hell of a lot of problems with trying to use Bitcoin as a mass market currency when Bitcoin gets big enough. It hasn't been big enough yet, and what we just saw in China is in fact a testament to the truth of what I'm arguing, and that is that Bitcoin in the last 6 months, in terms of its total capitalization of transactions, 98% of the volume has been Chinese. And because of this capital flight problem that we just described, China's government made an elective decision to change the nature of their policy orientation towards Bitcoin, and they're going to get even more aggressive when it comes to going after traders in China, because they consider it a leak on their ability to control the renminbi. And in turn, that impacts their ability to control their credit markets and their bond markets. And in turn, that impacts their ability to control their very economy. This is some serious stuff.
Well,
and the Chinese government is very powerful. They have the ability. I mean, Bitcoin, 98% of the transactions in Bitcoin in the last 6 months have been Chinese. And the Chinese government has the ability to make a living nightmare to Bitcoin traders. And yes, you can hold Bitcoin and keep it as a store of value, and it's very safe because of that. But as I've argued for years now, the weakest link in all of these cryptocurrencies is the on-ramps and off-ramps to commerce. Money is a wonderful thing from a store of value perspective, but money also has other definitions, and that's the ability to make transactions. And the limitation of cryptocurrencies will always default to the warfare that governments and central banks will lobby on the cryptocurrencies targeting the on-ramps and off-ramps to commerce. Well, and in the United States, to bring it home to a lot of our listeners, the IRS 5 years from now could conceivably make it even 10 times more onerous to deal with use of Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies for that matter.
The tax policy, Eric, for Bitcoin holders in the U.S. is already difficult. So
it's already insane. And I'm saying it can get 10 times worse. And on top of that, Jason, you can also be called a terrorist, and you can have a national security card pulled on you, and Bitcoin can literally be outlawed. And though people can own it and it'll have a store of value function, if you can't use it in commerce, all of a sudden the utility of the currency is diminished. When you diminish the utility of a currency, it becomes problematic in terms of envisioning it for mass market use as a currency.
Well,
it's a catch-22, and the libertarian friends that have argued with me about this, I don't think give enough credence to the weight of the on-ramps and off-ramps of commerce problem that Leviathan can target.
There's also, in the Bitcoin exchanges, it's dangerous not only from governments, there's also hackers. You know, if you have your Bitcoin stored at an exchange and the hackers have figured out through social engineering or whatever how to get the information and the emails and all the other contact stuff, they can transfer the Bitcoins. And
but that's not a problem with the currency itself. That's a problem of networks.
Yeah, I agree.
That's a different.
I agree,
that's a kind of a different thing.
But
and that also is even that sometimes is used by Leviathan, by governments to attack the very use of Bitcoin, because it's used as that's what the Chinese are doing.
Well,
the Chinese government right now are saying that Bitcoin is being used by terrorists and Bitcoin is being used by organized crime. And
well, I mean they're labeling what's a terrorist. That's changing very quickly. I have a story up here on Zero Hedge. The president of Turkey, Erdogan, he said today that the Turkish central bank and other central banks must thwart games played with the foreign exchange rate, which is being used against Turkey like a weapon. And he compared forex traders, foreign exchange traders, to terrorists. So I mean, so they didn't cause any economic problems in the country. But anytime, things go against the government, they're going to look for a scapegoat. Normally in the past, a lot of governments like to blame foreigners. Xenophobia is always a popular excuse for governments and politicians to blame when the economy goes bad or something bad happens within their own borders. To blame, the evil foreigners is all their fault. But, the definition of whoever's a financial terrorist, you own gold and silver, maybe they're going to call people that. So, that's why...
They already have.
Well...
and it's going to get worse. And when we have problems even in the United States when it comes to, the end game scenario being further along than where we are today, there's going to come a time when it's going to be very likely that we'll see problems with even the ability to deal with physical gold. Certainly, excess profit taxes are almost a given in the future when we have the need for capital controls in general, just like what the Chinese are trying to do right now when it comes to trying to slow down the rate of depreciation of the renminbi versus the U.S. dollar and other currencies. You know, they're actually getting capital controls, and their currency market has been going absolutely cuckoo in the last 2 months. It's just been a sight to see, and it's spilling over and screwing with all the other markets too. And you know what? It's going to be really interesting too, because, and we wanted to talk about this later in the show. Maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but you know, as a segue, I think that Trump and his focus on China and probably calling them a currency manipulator formally at some point, as well as trade frictions and possible tariffs and things along those lines. I mean, it's going to get so messy between the bilateral relationship between China and the United States that, you know, we've seen periods in the past where China has purposefully let the renminbi decline quite significantly against the dollar as a shot against the across the bow of the Federal Reserve when it came to trying to signal to Janet Yellen to, hey, don't go being too quick with, you know, interest rate normalization, because that screws with our currency and our economy. We're going to devalue right now just to show you who's boss, and bam, the S&P 500 went down about 10% in August. You know, I mean, I would not be surprised if we see some really nasty things on the economic front of warfare when it comes to Trump pursuing his objective of focus on North America, and in turn target China as possible currency manipulator, but certainly, you know, try to get them to have more tariffs so as to slow the process of our manufacturing base, whatever remains, moving further into other countries and whatnot. You know, that kind of economic nationalist policy is like one of the foundations of his entire outlook when it comes to his economic policy objectives. And we might see some interesting things happen when it comes to currencies, and that's definitely relevant to a lot of our audience, because that'll directly translate into gold. We see a Chinese quick devaluation, like what we spoke about, where maybe even a 10% or 20% kind of, well, it probably won't be 20%, that would be huge. That'd be like dropping a bomb on the international markets, but China might do 15% or 10%. Who knows? Maybe we see something like that in the summer. Holy cow, that would blow a hole in U.S. equity markets. It'd be a gigantic catalyst, and in turn, it would be a major positive for precious metals.
Yeah, so we're going to have a combination of coordinated currency devaluations and currency wars, I think, going forward. We've had them in the past. I think it's going to accelerate. And I think the currency markets, Eric, are the footprints that the large manipulation footprints, like you said earlier in the show, central bankers are trying to manipulate everything. But the markets, besides interest rates and their own local bond markets that they want to manipulate the most, are the currency markets.
Right, and they're so large, too.
Yes, they can hide the footprints. Yes, they can hide the manipulation footprints. To use an analogy here, running on the beach, when the tide comes in, it washes away some of the footprints, right? So that's how easily you can hide manipulation if you're not looking for it in currency markets compared to other markets.
You're right, except it's not so much that they're hiding it per se, it's just that it happens to be hidden by default. The only reason why they love messing around with the currency markets is because they're so large and powerful, and they're interlinked with the bond markets, and they're trying to control credit markets, because the credit markets are the problem with the asset rot within the banking system, and they're trying to save the banks.
Yep. The stuff that we've seen with the press release with the Federal Reserve saying $70 billion is only needed for U.S. and European banks, I mean, it's just totally ridiculous. Deutsche Bank probably needs even more than that all by itself. So, and then they're saying they won't give bailouts. So we know they're going to have to print the money because we know they want the status quo. We know they want more power. They're going to totalitarian government. We already have signs of it in many different places. Unfortunately, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. We see lots of different signs of this in our life, not just markets and manipulating different markets and fake government statistics and the mainstream media controlling the narrative. So I think it's going to be a difficult move going forward. You know, when you add in these capital controls with so many different other plans that Larry Summers and Ken Rogoff are writing about, it's really scary. Hopefully
and
these
the cashless society nonsense and their attack on India and all that other garbage.
Yes. Yeah, Jim Rickards wrote about this in his new book, The Road to Ruin. It's an interesting read. He talks about ICE 9 with bail-ins and not totally stealing people's accounts, but locking them up so people don't have access to them as form of capital control. So if there is, a new tax law or currency devaluation, you can't take your money out of one bank account in a country and go flee to another country to stop that.
Yep.
And then, we have on top of that, the globalist one world government people, the neo-Marxists like Thomas Piketty, who says governments should join together and promote a global wealth tax. And so that's what the globalists and the elites want. And then we have what the people are voting for, Eric, with the Brexits, with Donald Trump, with the Italian referendum. Marine Le Pen looks like in the spring she may win in France. She was just going to the Trump Tower today. I don't know if she got to speak to Donald Trump, but she was speaking to his aides. So it looks like, people are starting to fight back, at least with their vote. They want more economic nationalism, like you said. But, there's dangers with that, too. It's probably better in a lot of cases than pure globalism. And because, the people, the middle class people, have gotten screwed with globalism. The stuff they promised us, we really haven't gotten with globalism. And so, I mean, we've gotten cheap goods, but other than that, really, we haven't gotten much.
And very few wages to pay for them.
Yes. So more artificial credit if you're here in the West. So you've had to go on credit cards. But yeah, so the only real benefits here to globalism is that we've gotten, if you're maybe a shareholder in large dividend stock multinational companies, maybe you've gotten dividend increase with financial engineering. But if you're a regular Main Street person, globalism hasn't really given you that much other than cheaper goods in certain instances, because obviously your bills are rising in a lot of other things like food, healthcare, energy, etc., that the government statistics are not reflecting. So really you've got countercurrents. So you've got a tug of war here of not only inflation and deflation. You've got globalism versus nationalism. I really don't like either, to be honest, although nationalism is better than globalism. I prefer, free markets, but, we're having less free markets, unfortunately, at this point.
Well, I mean, you can have a nationalistic approach to the way nation states are set up and still have free markets. They're, not mutually exclusive. The problems with nationalism are derived or born from different aspects of nationalism, not necessarily free enterprise.
Good point.
Non-existent.
Good point. I would say the one of the problems with nationalism is protectionism and tariffs. So that can get into very dangerous waters. If you go back and look through history, you get into mercantilism. You go back and look that with the main one in the U.S. is Smoot-Hawley. That's the most recent case of really bad tariffs. Now, obviously, a lot of other countries, whether it's Japan, South Korea, China, they have very high tariffs on importing U.S. goods like U.S. automobiles and other things. I even heard a funny story, Eric. Did you hear the story about the price of an iPhone in Brazil?
No. I would imagine it's super high.
I heard it converts to around, when you add in all the extra taxes on it for capital controls and all the tariffs on it, it comes around to $2,000. And there was like per iPhone. So there was a late night Brazilian TV show, and there was a joke. It was like, David Letterman, like top 10, the 10 things you could do instead of buying an iPhone here in Brazil. And like one of the main ones was, you can pick out a girl you like, you can fly to Miami, you can get a hotel room for a couple nights, you can take her out on nice dates, have sex with her, you can buy 2 iPhones, one for you, one for her, fly home to Brazil, and it's still cheaper than buying one iPhone in Brazil. So I heard
we'll have to talk to some of our listeners in Brazil and see how they think of that plan.
So that's the dangerous thing with protectionism and tariffs. Our listeners in other countries are more familiar with that. In the U.S., there's not huge tariffs for the most part on a lot of imported goods. A lot of the tariffs on U.S. goods going to other countries are a lot higher, but it looks like the U.S. is going to start putting up big tariffs. We can not only have a trade war, Eric, we can start turning into resource wars. If you go back and look through modern history, trade wars can tend to lead to resource wars, and where one country, not only do they increase tariffs on each other tit for tat, they also, China has a monopoly on rare earths. I was talking about this with Nomi Prince. If you haven't listened to my Nomi Prince interview yesterday, go listen to it. We didn't talk about the rare earths part a lot, but, U.S. companies from Apple Computer, making, smartphones, tablets, all these high-end electronics we need to Predator drones and other stuff that the U.S. military needs, these things need rare earths. And China, now rare earths mining, I wrote a whole report on this many years ago. I spent literally weeks reading nothing but rare earth company annual reports and studying balance sheets and supply demand and all this stuff. Now, rare earths are not that rare. There's a few rare earths that are rare, but, China basically can mine the rare earths at a very, very low price that no one else on planet Earth can compete with, because they basically allow very environmentally unfriendly mining in China. But the real key there, besides, China being able to mine rare earths cheaper than everyone else because they don't worry about the environmental impact around the mines, is that China has basically a monopoly, Eric, on the supply chain for rare earths. So turning the rare earths into all the different value-added products. And if China really wanted to screw over the U.S. and, send a message, they could start restricting even more than they do now any exports of rare earths to United States companies if Trump were to say, call them out as currency manipulators and put a 40% tariff on imported Chinese goods. So, I know a lot of our listeners are libertarian, and a good amount of them did vote for Trump, and they think Trump can fix the economy. I don't think Trump's going to fix the economy, Eric, with the tariffs. I think Trump can fix the economy by bringing in a smart cabinet that is more business savvy and maybe negotiating more mutually beneficial trade deals with countries like Russia, where, they can provide us with things that we don't have, and we can provide them with things they don't have. And we could have some type of more beneficial, instead of, this neocon bullshit war stuff that's going on. But I think the real thing that Trump can do to fix the economy is not going to be from tariffs. I think it's going to be from cutting the red tape, the taxes, the rules, the regulations on small businessmen and medium-sized businesses, and allowing American companies of that size, getting rid of things like Obamacare. So the small and medium-sized businessmen will feel more comfortable making investments and growing their business here in the U.S. and hiring employees full-time.
Yeah, and, traditionally in the United States, as is the case in a lot of other countries, but certainly more so in the United States, 90%, 85% of new job creation has always been on the back of companies 50 employees or smaller. And those companies have had their heads handed to them with the stepped-up level of regulations and Obamacare, companies that, and just finding it hard to survive. And then on top of that, all of the job growth in the United States has been, by and large, a lot of part-time jobs being offered by mega-large corporations trying to reshape their entire labor forces to have a far higher percentage of their labor force comprised of people who are working less than 30 hours a week, so as to avoid paying health care. Because healthcare suddenly had a bomb dropped on it on purpose by our dear leaders.
Well, they got
in the form of Obamacare.
Some of the corporations got Obamacare exemptions too, but I've heard from companies like Walmart and Target, Eric, that they have very sophisticated software that the managers at the Targets or Walmarts can just plug in the employees, and it juggles around the hours. So the employees, instead of working 40 hours a week to be a full-time employee, they work 39. So it juggles around all the hours without the manager sitting around trying to figure out the numbers himself.
Or 29. 29.
Oh, sorry.
The threshold be 30.
Okay. Yeah. So and then the other part-time jobs, Eric, are bartenders, waiters. So those aren't, you can't have a living on those. A lot of people have been forced to have multiple part-time jobs, and then we hear our politicians crowing about the huge gains in employment that we've had since the 2008 financial/economic crash, and it's all a bunch of lies. Yep. Well, I mean, Obama. We know. The funny thing is, Obama claimed that his 8 years here in office were scandal free. I mean, he had so many scandals, whether it was Benghazi, Fast and Furious. One of the main scandals that since we cover finance and economics, that no one really talks about was his Department of Labor scandal to get reelected. I mean, he totally cooked the jobs numbers.
Yeah,
The
that's right.
jobs numbers were totally cooked for him to get reelected. And, the part-time jobs that the economy had created were lied and said to be real full-time jobs.
And just to flesh that out so that our listeners understand, we're not talking about the generic day in, day or monthly reporting sequence of, BLS reports on an ongoing basis. They literally targeted 2 to 3 months back in the last, his contest for getting a second term to paint the tape and get him reelected. I think it was John Crudell in the New York Post who did like 2 or 3 investigative pieces on this.
And
he really made a strong case and basically proved that this is what the Commerce Department and people at the Bureau of Labor Statistics were thinking.
Yeah, and it was the Department of Labor. There was actually a couple whistleblowers who he didn't
Right.
use their names to protect their identity who came forward, because we all know how the Obama administration deals with whistleblowers, despite what he promised. So.
Yeah, the most transparent president in world history. Right. I am so looking forward to seeing him on the golf course and retiring. He's got 300 rounds of golf to play this year. Let's get him out of there and send him on his way.
Well, that transition, since we were talking about part-time jobs, to a key story since our last Welcome to Dystopia episode. Early in 2017, 20 states have raised their minimum wage. Early in 2017. What do you think this means for the real economy then?
Well, like we've talked about, and listeners might really like listening to, I think it was our 3rd show going way back on robotics. We'll see a lot more robotics coming into the service sector, automation for hamburger flipping even, not just cashiering of transactions at McDonald's.
Did you see Did you see, Eric, in Silicon Valley, the world's first fully autonomous hamburger restaurant opened up? I think it's opened up in the last couple months. So you pay with a touch screen. You select your burger and your toppings, how you want it cooked, etc., your sides, and you pay with a credit card. There's no human being there. And then in the back is a couple different robots, and it goes down the line, cooking your burger, adding in the the toppings on there, and etc. And you just pick it up and sit down.
Hey, maybe you'll get an automated chair to take you to your table, and there'll be an arm to wipe your mouth whenever you need it. You just wink at like some optical scanner sitting on the table, and it'll wipe your mouth for you too.
Yeah, so we have people like Bernie Sanders talking about how, the minimum wage needs to go higher for a living wage, but Bernie may be a bleeding heart liberal, and he may be a nice guy, but he doesn't understand anything about economics at all. He doesn't understand the unintended consequences of trying to force the wages higher, government, fiat, politicians, and bureaucrats trying to force the wages higher. It's probably, years from now, Eric, when we look back on the minimum wage increases, not only is it going to mean more investment in automation and robotics and touch screens and things like that, like you mentioned, but it's also going to mean less full-time employees. So
and the worst thing about it is that it removes the lower rungs of an economic ladder that enables people who are just getting into the workforce to learn skills so as to build their careers. And when you have people in the progressive movement championing the destruction of what ends up being a lot less jobs available at lower wages for people to begin the process of, learning how to have a career and advance themselves, literally the opportunities for an entire class or generation of people in our society go up in smoke.
Yep.
And it's counterintuitive, and progressives don't understand this, but that is one of the unintended consequences.
Well, I love Frederick Bastiat. I think he's one of the best writers I've ever read, and he talks about the unintended consequences, the seen and the unseen. Read Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. He's writing very similarly to Bastiat. Read Frederick Bastiat's The Law. Read anything Bastiat wrote, actually. The funny thing is he should be a hero in France. He should be one of France's greatest writers, And I don't even think he's taught in French schools. It's sad.
He's one of the greatest economists of all time. He's so underappreciated.
Well,
and philosophers.
Yeah, I mean, not only was he an economist, he was also a philosopher. So he wrote some brilliant common sense philosophy on how to live your life. And yet, you know, probably if you and me went to France and we started interviewing people and asking them, French people, if they've heard of Frederick Bastiat, what do you think 1 in 10 would even know who he is? Not even?
You might think you're talking about a restaurant or something.
Okay, so we got a couple more topics before we get to our scumbag nominees. We have the pension fund crisis that looks like it's accelerating. There's a lot of different evidence of this. I read a Daniel Amerman piece. I didn't get to discuss that before 2016 ended. He put out a good piece towards the end of the year in 2016 that his estimates are pension funds in the United States at many different levels, many different states and municipalities of, you know, teachers' pension funds, government employee pension funds, federal employee pension funds. He estimates many of them are 4 to 7 times underfunded. And this is because, for our listeners out there who aren't familiar with finance, you know, there's assumptions that are made to compound wealth. And so a lot of these pension funds, Eric, have needed, what, 8%? They assume 7-8% returns per year, compounded. So over a long period of time, if you're compounding the total principal amount, the amount of money you've saved and invested at 7 to 8% per year for a long time, it adds up to a large sum. However, if you're, instead of getting 7 to 8% per year, you're getting 1% per year or less now in the environment we're in, you know, where there's government bonds now are basically rate-free risk, as Rick Rule and James Grant of Grant's Interest Rate Observer would say. You know, in that environment, you can't really compound wealth. You're going to have to take on a lot more risk. And then we have, you know, you can basically go look at any mainstream financial website or publication and see stories basically every day about pension funds writing off bad investments in commercial real estate, in shale oil, junk debt, in hedge funds, in private equity. There's a lot of bad investments that they've taken on for extra risk to try to make up and get back to that 7 to 8% level, but it's just not realistic when you have, you know, hundreds of billions of dollars and trying to compound at 7 to 8% per year.
Yeah, and you know, this is a great opportunity too to talk about the really biggest of big pictures, the theme that we speak about many a time too, and that's that whole cycle of financialization of darn near friggin' everything in our economy, and financial assets going higher and higher and higher, and governments growing ever bigger, because we have a fiat-predicated system, and it's basically one where we have perpetual reflation of everything. And that's a very different paradigm that has kind of gone berserk in the last 40 years, and it keeps getting worse every friggin' decade. 40 years ago, the pension industry had the luxury of a paradigm where they could sit on T-bills, not T-bills, T-bonds, you know, 10-year bonds, and be able to have a viable functioning pension fund. And now the 10-year bond is at 2.6 yield, give or take, you know, moving around a lot. How do you have a risk-free core to your pension fund when supposedly the core risk-free asset, the United States bond, you know, a United States-based pension fund would look at the United States Treasury bond as a cornerstone asset to hold? Is it any wonder that we have pension funds that are becoming insolvent? The system is so broken at a fundamental level.
There's also corruption, too, at the pension fund level. I also see, like, once a month at least, I see news stories in the financial media of a pension fund manager was bribed to, you know, put this amount of investment money into this investment. It was a bad investment, but the pension fund manager, you know, got a big payout or extra vacations. So there's corruption in the system there as well. But I mean, financial repression and manipulating interest rates, I don't like a lot of these stupid academic financial theories that they've taught, like efficient market hypothesis, capital asset price it. You know, you said the main thing of capital asset pricing model is that, you know, you have to base out everything off the U.S. Treasury, right? Because because that's the risk.
We've had the biggest bubble in all of world history in the United States bond market. Excuse me? You're gonna claim that the capital asset pricing model still works. I mean, if you screw with the bond market the way that we have, it fucks up everything.
Exactly. And
excuse my French.
Well, they're manipulating interest rates, they're manipulating bond markets, they're creating new categories to hide buyers. We were discussing this before the show and recording. They're manipulating currency exchange rates to try to hide the inflation. They're manipulating precious metals prices. So they're trying to manipulate. They're even manipulating the news. So
and they're calling us fake news purveyors because they need to prevent people from recognizing that they're the fake news purveyors. Welcome to Dystopia.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see what governments decide to do with the pension funds. Eric, do you think then that the governments have been trying to manipulate the stock market higher, prop it up because of the pension funds? Do you think that's one of the main reasons why there was maybe a token interest rate increase by Janet Yellen, and also why the stock market basically is manipulated higher is because they're trying to...
maybe that's like reason benefit number 8 that they were targeting. It wasn't like number 1, 2, or 3, but that's part of what their thinking is. But the immediacy of their problem was the world dollar shortage, as the U.S. dollar is rising as a currency versus the other currencies. The service debt payments that international lenders and international borrowers who have dollar-denominated obligations end up having to find more dollars to be able to pay their interest on the obligations that they hold. So if you're sitting in the Brazilian real economy and you have a gigantic noose around your neck of a dollar-denominated debt and your currency's going down, you need to further reaccelerate the translation of your Brazilian real into yet more dollars, which pushes the price of dollar up vis-a-vis the real. And it becomes a shortage, quote unquote. It's kind of counterintuitive. That's one of the drivers of this so-called shortage of dollars. And it's one of these other flywheel kind of dynamics that end up screwing with global financial markets, and the FX market in particular is like the transmission mechanism for this particular oddity.
Yeah, I would just call that another new economic landmine. So now, all the other landmines we've discussed since the 2008 financial crisis that have either not been fixed or gotten worse. This is just another new one. So you have a strong dollar on the dollar index. Higher interest rates are another economic landmine. Don't know the exact number it would take to blow up many other global markets and create counterparty risk and derivatives failing on the interest rates. If the oil price,
I know we're gonna see some of that actually. I mean, you and I have been talking, and I've been saying for a year and a half that 105 on the dollar index, DXY index, just as a benchmark for people to wrap their brains around. It ain't going over 105, and it will go over 105, and when it does, it will not go past that level without Federal Reserve policymakers starting to hit the talking circuit and jawboning and making noises about how painful the dollar has been to U.S. corporate profits and all that. By the way, I think we're going to see within a week, with the beginning of the earnings season, a lot of Fortune 500 companies complaining about how the rise in the dollar has blown a hole in their profits internationally. And I forget what the statistics are now, but it was somewhere in the order of like 65% of S&P 500 universe companies. I mean, there's utilities and companies that face mostly the domestic economy within the S&P 500, but the majority of earnings that are owned by our mega corporations are internationally based.
Yep.
And when the dollar goes up, that kicks them in the butt.
Yep. And if you listen to Nomi Prince, she said she expects a lot more corporate defaults based on interest rates increasing, and also the strong dollar and the dollar index from the corporations that borrowed in cheaper foreign currencies. So that's going to cause corporate defaults that people weren't expecting. She expects that to trend higher as well. And my
it's going to cause a stock market correction.
Well, without the plunge protection team, the fundamentals of the
they're going to respond to it, and they're going to save it, but it's going to cause the correction regardless. They're going to come in later and try to, if the correction takes place over 2 weeks, they'll be there. They'll try to catch the markets, and they will. But we're still going to see the correction, and I think that's literally in the first quarter.
And then my Eric Townsend interview from last week, which was also interesting. I don't agree with everything Eric Townsend said, but he made a very interesting point there about the dollar index and the dollar rising. You know, that 105 number you gave, if it gets to that level or higher, you know, he thinks that there's going to have to be a Plaza Accord or Bretton Woods type of agreement where the central
that
banks...
would be 115 to 120, actually. He's a little off, but his general theme is correct. They won't freak out that bad unless if they totally lose control, and that's actually a reasonably high probability.
Yeah, so and then that would probably the counteraction then, Eric. I've said this for a while now. I think eventually at some point that the people in the United States, the Federal Reserve, the people in power, the elites, they're going to have to do something similar to what FDR did in 1933. So it's going to be
gold confiscation.
No, well, devaluation of the dollar. They're not going to get as much devalue. They're going to want to devalue the dollar against gold. So
right,
I'm not
but
saying
we're not. It's a different world though, because we don't have a currency predicated on gold. So,
but they
they'll devalue it differently.
But they have to devalue the dollar against something, right?
Yes.
So the only thing that's going to be left to devalue it against is probably going to be gold, and then gold's
but I mean, you're talking about endgame scenario, and before we even get to the direst of most dire stages, because I mean, for the United States to have a complete, and for the global economy as well, because I mean, if the United States was going to go back onto a gold standard, do something so radical like that, it would have to be a global thing, global currency, global financial resets, all of that. That could very well happen. Before that happens, though, we'll see just absolute insanity.
Well,
because the policymakers won't want to go there unless if they're absolutely pushed, unbelievably pushed hard.
Yeah, I called it the nuclear option
right.
of devaluing the dollar against gold. They don't have to go back on a gold standard immediately under that scenario. They can put gold. I know ideally it's already being talked about. They want to put gold into the SDR basket, at least a portion of it. For the next, that's what the global elites want. So it wouldn't be a full gold standard. It would be some type of reserve standard, a fractional gold standard.
Well, but understand though, Jason, that the reason why they say those things is not because they want to have gold per se as being a part of the global financial system, and then also to be able to have the SDR as a liquidity pump and an alternative fiat-based system that has a little seasoning of gold in it inside. So as to be able to devalue the U.S. dollar and other currencies against the SDR, on and on and on. We spoke a moment ago about what do you devalue the dollar against. Well, the goal is actually before the nuclear option of going to a gold standard comes the SDR. And that is one of the policy options that is being groomed. It's on the shelf, and it may be used. And, the reality in that context is not that you see policymakers embracing gold for the sake of using gold as a eventual transition to a gold standard or anything close to it. No. That's not what that's about. What that's about is actually trying to give confidence to the 90% remainder of the basket, of the SDR basket, which will be a fiat creation. It's a way of public relations spin to apply to the SDR to give it greater credence and confidence in the global markets. I mean, the Americans won't give a rat's rear end about it, but the Chinese will love it. They'll take the SDR far more seriously, and they're the primary advocate for having gold as a 10% weighting within the SDR for exactly these reasons.
Yeah, to give some context, to give a historical perspective, the SDR and putting, very tiny amount of gold in it would be like what the French did before the hyperinflation of 1790, before Napoleon came into power there during the French Revolution. And so the French, as the currency was having problems, I think they tried to back the assignat of 1789 with some type of real estate, and they said, look, it's backed by church lands and real estate, but it wasn't fully backed by real estate. It was only partially backed, just to buy some time, and so it didn't really buy them that much time at all, and the currency just went.
And then there's bonkers. The whole John Law craziness.
Well, John Law, the French have had different
context.
Oh yeah, John Law was over 100 years before the second French hyperinflation.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've got a couple more current events. So we have Rex Tillerson's confirmation and Jeff Sessions. That was interesting, seeing the hypocrisy of the people in Congress going after him. The Trump family actually did a fundraiser for Cory Booker as late as 2013. So they helped get him elected, and yet here he was, going after calling Jeff Sessions a racist. It's unbelievable, how easily these politicians can flip-flop. We have, Eric, literally politicians with experience only as a career politician or a lawyer making fun of Rex Tillerson, who's done nothing but negotiate with people in different countries all over the world for economic deals. So yes, Rex Tillerson's not a perfect candidate, but compared to the experience levels of many other secretaries of state, I mean, he has a lot more experience negotiating trade deals and economic stuff than pretty much anyone else before him. His business experience is probably as good as it gets for Secretary of State. And yet, we have politicians and the mainstream media just going after these guys for any little thing they can. It'll be interesting to see if they actually get confirmation. The ExxonMobil guy is probably going to go through because of the regular Republicans and they're pro-oil normally. But we'll see what happens with Sessions. I'm not an expert on this stuff, so I'm just, this stuff is reality TV, Eric. I mean, the crazy stuff. The last like 12 months since Trump, even before Trump got the nomination, he was just, rising up in the Republican primary ranks and just, bullying the rest of them and making fun of them and, picking them off one by one. It was just great reality TV. But I mean, this whole presidency, the Trump presidency, they have, I think, one of the bookies has even odds on Trump getting impeached, which is pretty crazy already that they're already doing that. He's not even in office. But,
I saw that story. Let me ask you, because I didn't read it. Just saw the headline. Was it that the odds of 50% or greater that he would actually, the process of him being impeached, being launched, or outright that he successfully is removed from office?
Impeachment being launched. I think that's all that's needed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're already calling for that but basically, I think, depending upon if Trump has 1 term or 2 terms, so it's either 4 years or 8 years if he doesn't get impeached, I mean, we're going to have reality. We're going to have pretty amazing reality TV. Whether you love Trump or hate him or you're kind of indifferent, I mean, it's going to be really fascinating stuff going forward.
Well, even this whole, Pissgate stuff. The golden showers controversy. I mean, for Christ's sakes, there's a certain aspect of all of this that is purposefully done simply to just make a huge stink and a mess, controversy, so as to make his ability to govern almost impossible.
Well, I mean, it's dividing the country still. So the people who already didn't like Trump are pointing, hey, look, he's a sexual deviant now, right? So,
That's right.
But the people
and blackmailable by the Russians, and therefore we really need to worry about him, and on and on. I mean,
yes,
God forbid they might even use that as a national security card and pull that between now and the inauguration, or hang it over his head at any given time in the next 4 years for strategic leverage. That's why they do these things.
But the people who love Trump, Eric, are going to say, you know what, that's fake news. It's all bullshit. Trump said the head of the national security, one of the national security agencies in the U.S. already confirmed it's fake, and it was shoddy.
Doesn't matter though. The point being is that you got half of the country thinking that it's real, and they don't listen to the subsequent denials or backpedaling and CIA claiming that they only showed the 35-page dossier because they wanted to talk about it in terms of, or the whole shower, golden showers gate stuff as being something that is an example of disinformation. Oh, we're angels. We want to teach you how some things are disinformation. But in the meantime, earlier they give the dossier to John McCain and the intelligence community, and McCain being part of the Intelligence Oversight Committee, and then they shop this thing out to BuzzFeed, and it gets out to the press, and it goes berserk. It doesn't matter what is fact or fiction. It's all optics. And when you have a divided country as we do in the United States, where everyone's just yelling at each other and nobody actually caring to, take a deep breath and try to actually find out what is truth and what is fiction, the end game is a president that can't get anything done, and that's the objective. They want to put a leash on the guy because the interested or not interested in having Trump run a successful presidency are running around talking about golden showers and hookers peeing on him. That is what's going on.
or calling him like the worst president ever already for not answering one or two
reporters. He hasn't even entered office yet.
for not answering one or two reporters' questions at his first press conference yesterday or the day before. So yeah, the stuff, the slander and the headlines and the hyperbole is just unbelievable. I mean, Trump though, like, if the art of the deal is not really a business book, it just talks about how he markets himself. And basically, he's willing to say a lot of crazy things in order to get free publicity or to shift focus from something to something else. So we'll see how he spins this. But the mainstream media is trying to retaliate against him for trying to, go over their heads from Twitter directly to the people.
Yeah.
Well, there's other funny stories too. The German Green Party is talking about implementing free prostitutes. There's the Italian actress that is giving is giving fellatio to people for voting no in the Italian referendum. But the other thing I wanted to talk about before the Scumbag Nominees is Trump is going after Big Pharma. Finally, a lot of the presidents won't touch this, but he's getting blowback from the Congress, the establishment. So these politicians, whether they're Republicans like John McCain or guys like Cory Booker, who are Democrats, they're bought by lobbyists. So Big Pharma is no different than the Wall Street banks, the military-industrial complex. They're very well entrenched. They control basically the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. So they block a lot of the smaller drugs if it's a big company with a big established drug already and there's a disruptive drug. There's ways for them to block it and stop it. So they can either buy up the patents for pennies or delay the drug so long that the little company can't afford it and has to sell out. Or they can just block the drug entirely. And, it looks like Trump is trying to, as part of, dealing with Obamacare, we discussed this before, trying to limit the patents on Big Pharma and trying to get generics in other countries like Canada that doesn't have as strict a patent system and moving in cheaper generic drugs, and the people in Congress are blocking it. So we'll see if Trump is able to accomplish this goal or not. We already know Obamacare is going to be very tough to repeal, so it'll be interesting. Trump, the messages I've heard from Trump, whether they're on Twitter or from people close to him in the Trump administration, are mixed on Obamacare. I've heard from some of his closest aides in articles covered in different places that, they're going to only repeal parts of it, that parts of it he likes and other parts he's going to keep, and only parts he's going to get rid of. But he said recently on Twitter that he's going to try to repeal everything very quickly. So we'll see which one he actually does.
It's going to be interesting to watch. I have a hard time imagining how they can repeal a lot in a short period of time, if, in fact, being able to repeal much of anything of significance, because in order to do that, they have to have something that will come in its place. And the whole system has been so screwed up that it's going to be really hard for them to do anything.
Yeah, well, welcome to Dystopia. I get Facebook friends of mine who I went to college with saying that, like, it's so wrong that Obamacare is going to be repealed, and then I asked them what. No, we got a dog barking in the back. I guess that's
my dog's pissed about Obamacare. Sorry about that. his medical bill's gone skyrocketing higher, but he gets good food, so he's good.
Yeah. So anyway, my college friends, for some reason, I guess they think Obamacare has benefited them. I've tried to ask them how it's benefited them, but they think it's wrong that Obamacare should be repealed, even though, when I ask them if their bills have gone up, they seem to indicate that they have.
Yeah, so, and earlier on they may have gotten subsidies or whatever, but 2 years from now they're going to be over a barrel when they recognize all the subsidies are gone, whatever else happens afterwards, because it's going to get a lot more onerous. because the entire system was designed to hide the total costs of the system from day one.
Oh, yeah. The only reason the Supreme Court passed it, Eric, at all was because it was a tax. And also because I hear that there was some blackmail on some judges. But anyway, though, the main reason that they cited for actually passing it in the Supreme Court briefings was that it was a tax. Even though Obama said it wasn't a tax, Obama, gave a whole bunch of different lies saying to pass it that, your costs won't be increased. You can keep your same doctor. It's not a tax. It's fully paid for, blah, blah, blah. But we know the truth. So we know that the truth is more like what Nancy Pelosi said, how most of them who signed it into law didn't even know what was in it.
They didn't have an opportunity to know what was in it because what Nancy Pelosi said is we have to pass the law in order to read what's in it. I mean, literally, it's so bad that it's not as if a lot of times our so-called leaders don't have the desire to know what the hell they're voting on. Sometimes the lobbyists that write the damn bills don't even have the entire bill before somebody's staff in order to brief the congressman or senator on what they're about to put their signature towards, or voting card and saying yay or nay. We are so-called representative system. There you have it. We have corporatism gone wild.
Yep, and then there's the whole thing about Obamacare being designed to fail anyway. I mean, there's a lot of evidence, whether it's the Gruber guy or others that you've spoken to, Dr. Janda well, and I've heard from him on his show that the people he's spoken with, that Obamacare was basically designed to fail. So capitalism could be blamed. It's all the evil, greedy insurance companies' fault why Obamacare failed, not because of, governments intervening in it and other problems associated with it. And then makes it easier then to pass universal health care or single payer options then. So it was basically designed to fail from the beginning, and then the people that really made it fail are not going to get the blame.
Yeah, it's kind of going a little bit far to say that it was designed to fail from the beginning universally, and that all the advocates for it would believe that. I mean, that's making too strong of a case. But certainly, and Dave Jan has told me this, that he had people involved with the people that were involved with the formation of the policy to begin with. Many of them had, in fact, been fully aware, and it's not just what Dr. Janda has revealed, but this is common knowledge that a lot of people, upon looking at the edifice that they were constructing, they recognized that it never would work in the first place, and they kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, who cares, screw it, we really want a national payer, single payer system anyway, so let's just pass this ugly sausage and watch it blow up in 10 years, and when the system is so screwed up and people are screaming because they can't afford to prevent their grandmother from dying or what have you, that we'll get a national health care system. And the uber liberal progressive faction within the policy establishment that looks forward to that kind of reality recognized Obamacare for, in fact, the bomb waiting to blow up that it is.
Yeah, and to add to your point there, Eric, I mean, this is a goal for a lot of progressives. Hillary Clinton, when she was First Lady with Bill Clinton in the White House, she had been trying to pass versions of this with healthcare rationing and et cetera.
Yes.
So, I mean, she's been trying to pass versions of this for a very, very long time, and it's been a goal of theirs. Okay, yeah. Well, now we're to the scumbag section. We're in a long show. We're over an hour, guys, so hopefully we've kept it relatively entertaining. We have the scumbag section, though. This is a pretty entertaining part. There's 3 quick nominees. So we have John Corzine, who I think is a Hall of Fame scumbag. For those of you who aren't familiar with John Corzine, he's former CEO of Goldman Sachs. He was the 54th governor of New Jersey from 2006 to 2010. And then he took over as CEO of MF Global. And he bankrupted them in 2011. And what did he do? He took $1.6 billion of customer money and went missing because he gambled with the money that he wasn't supposed to. What's the technical term is what, commingling?
Yeah.
It's commingling, but I mean, it really means stealing.
I mean, he didn't put it into his own personal bank accounts. We got to make that clear. But he gambled with the effort to save MF Global went berserk, and as MF Global imploded, the accounts of many people went with it.
Yep. And now people did get some of their money back. I think Gerald Celente was one of the guys who got screwed over, and I think he said he got about 70% of his money back, but it took more than 18 months. So,
right.
but I mean, that's totally messed up. And the even more messed up part about this is that Corzine is so politically connected with Hillary Clinton and Obama. John Corzine, it's commonly known, guys, is one of the top Democratic fundraisers. I mean, he's been doing this for a long time, raising, tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions, actually, in fundraising for the Democratic Party. So he's so politically connected that he was able to, instead of spending the rest of his life in prison for all these white-collar financial crimes of fraud and other stuff, he was able to get off with only a $5 million civil fine to settle. It's you really can't make this stuff up.
And civil fine is different from criminal as well. That's significant.
Oh, yeah, too. So it looks like, with the civil fine that a lot of these extra class action lawsuits were indemnified then, it looks like. I'd have to look into this.
Could very well be. I mean, other cases can be levied, of course.
Well, I mean,
other suits.
Well, I mean, he's been, if you Google this and you look at different articles, he's been like frolicking on beaches with like women half his age where he should be in prison the rest of his life. So he's a smiling, smug, total scumbag who got away with.
Scumbag he is.
Well, yeah, he got away with one of the biggest, other than Bernie Madoff, it's been one of the biggest financial crimes of the last like 10 years. So,
yeah.
And he got away with it a lot better than Madoff did. Okay, so...
Yeah, well, Madoff screwed over Prince Charles and the royal family and pissed off a lot of, pretty significantly powerful people. He wasn't very strategic in his crimes, or tactical, perhaps.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, yeah, Madoff stole from so many rich people. You mentioned the rich Europeans that are royals. He stole from them. He stole from drug cartels and a lot of other prominent people that there was nowhere on the planet that was safe that he could run to. So it's
hazardous to one's wealth if you piss off oligarchs.
Yes. The safest place for Madoff at that point, he realized, was prison. That's why he turned himself in and confessed. Anyways, though, your dog wants us to end the show.
Yeah.
Okay, we're hurrying up. Madoff. Okay, we're hurrying up. Only
he was an MS Global customer.
Okay, 2 more. We'll do it quick. We got the VP Vice President Joe Biden today was actually surprise winner of the Presidential Medal of Freedom Award. I didn't know.
I'm not surprised.
Huh? You're not surprised?
Not at all.
I'm not surprised.
He's been a good little foot soldier, and Obama's just rewarding him and patting him on his head. I mean, Biden has been like an operative, frankly, in terms of what he's done on the international stage, certainly. I mean, he was involved with the whole fiasco in Ukraine and just all kinds of stuff that he's done. He's a well-deserving scumbag. The funniest thing about him is that he's so arrogant, and he's so oblivious to how his world is completely different that he's known as foot and mouth Biden. Our listeners should go to Google, type in foot and mouth Joe Biden, and then search and then click on the image link for Google Images database, and you'll don't do this after you've drunk anything. You do not want to decorate your monitor.
Well,
I mean, when I say he's known for being foot and mouth, you would be amazed at how pervasive that so-called meme has moved, and it's well-deserved. I mean, he is amazing.
I call him Crazy Uncle Joe. So he's kind of like that.
As do Secret Service agents and so forth.
Yes. There's books out about this, guys. You can look into this. But there's books talking about stories from Secret Service agents. There's confirmation of this. But supposedly Joe Biden's a prankster, and he likes to drink a lot. So to play jokes on Secret Service agents, when they change their shifts, and they come over to his house to change like their security detail, he likes to answer the door butt naked. So, and he enjoys walking around, naked and skinny dipping naked to mess with them further. So, he's the crazy drunk uncle. Every family has a black sheep. If you've seen that Chris Farley movie.
Yeah.
So every family kind of has like that one person or two people that, haven't they're not good at adulting. They're like barely functioning adults. They're basically like a teenager or college kid in a much older adult's body. That's basically like Joe Biden. And I won't
crazy perpetual frat boy.
Basically, and I won't talk about any of his potential involvement in Pizzagate, where he posted, just a weird friendship bracelet that he gave to Barack Obama on his Twitter feed and on his Twitter and Instagram with the name Barack and slices of pizza charms on it, which are not really available. So I don't know if he's involved in the Pizzagate stuff, but why is he giving Barack Obama a weird friendship bracelet with pizza slice charms on it? It's just for older men to be giving that as a gift. I don't know if it's an inside joke or he's just, maybe he was drunk as shit and just buying things on the internet late at night.
Plausible deniability.
Well, I mean, crazy Uncle Joe, it seems to me something funny he would do would be like get drunk and then go on a, internet buying spree of random things. So I don't know, maybe he did that and that's why he bought the pizza charms for Barack Obama. I don't know. I also don't know why Barack Obama likes $65,000 worth of hot dogs and pizza, but from Chicago. Anyways though, our last scumbag nominee is Fiat Chrysler. And they have been accused now by the EPA of also cheating on their emission tests like Volkswagen, and they got caught. So Zero Hedge predicted, we'll attach the article to this, Zero Hedge predicted that a lot of other automotive companies besides Volkswagen were doing this, and it looks like they were right about it. So, I mean, there's going to be corporations that are also going to be scumbags. We don't just go after politicians and bureaucrats, although those guys are pretty easy targets.
And there certainly are enough of them.
Okay, guys. Well, that's the show for today. So hopefully we've kept it entertaining. We are at over an hour 15, which is pretty longer than we normally want to do it. But I think we covered a lot of interesting stuff, and we kind of wrapped up good part of 2016 and gave you a little bit of preview for 2017. If you've listened to any of the interviews that we put on the Wall Street for Main Street channel in the last week or two, I think 2017 is going to be a very interesting but volatile year, especially with currency markets and a lot of the news coming out. So I guess the term now, Eric, fake news is what the Washington Post and the New York Times are trying to retire it and get rid of the term fake news, but
yeah, well, when you're being threatened to, or at least facing the prospect of being sued for the fallacious stories and bombastic propaganda that you levy, you'd want to distance yourself from that. And then on top of everything else, it's not just from a legal fear point of view, it's from a credibility point of view, too. I mean, the mainstream media is really suffering at this stage because a very large percentage of the American people, and to some extent internationally as well, recognize that that the fake news purveyors are in fact the mainstream media. I mean, we certainly have a very large swath of garbage news in the alternative media, and people making just silly. I mean, there's a lot of people involved in media in the alternative media space who are literally just individuals who have a website. And they don't have resources. They don't have the ability to fact check. And more of what they do is editorial as opposed to news. But to turn around and claim that we need to shut down free speech and kill the First Amendment, and to do it in ways that most people don't even recognize that is, in fact, the end result, at least massive curtailment of speech, that's really the problem that we have.
Yep, welcome to Dystopia. But I think that's why this PC culture that started with the mainstream media, in government schools, at the university level, this PC culture was designed, to start to drastically increase censorship and to, basically in steps eliminate the First Amendment and freedom of speech. Because now
it's not so much to literally target speech, it's to target the ability to think and to understand what is object reality, such that you don't even necessarily ask the right questions to be able to find out answers to questions and listen to speech, because if you don't ask the right questions, you don't even necessarily care about speech.
Yep, well said. So I will be at the Deplorable a week from today, next Thursday. So
you deplorable soul. You're one of those.
You know what, man? Hopefully with my cell phone battery, it's chargeable because I hear the protests there's gonna be a lot of people protesting. I may get some video on this. It's gonna be some crazy protesters there. But I'm looking to meet some interesting people there and talk. Maybe meet some sexy libertarian girls, at least girls that support Trump, because that aren't total snowflakes that are brainwashed
Yeah.
that love.
Yeah, and 2017's here. We got to do the contest for lunch with Jason. So maybe we can win your opportunity to have lunch with Jason.
Yeah, well, we've talked.
But you have to be a cute libertarian. I mean, we probably need to put some parameters on this contest.
Well, we've also talked about doing an investing conference here in the DC metro area when it's warmer, so maybe we could tie it into that. Something to think about.
Now
Okay.
you're motivated to put the conference on really even all the more.
Okay, Eric.
Sorry.
Well, that's it for today's show. The next show of Welcome to Dystopia, episode number 32, will occur after Trump is already in office. So we'll see any other interesting current events that happen between then will be on the next show. That's it for the show. Everyone have a great weekend, guys. Unfortunately, it's going to snow here in the DC metro area this weekend, but everyone try to have an enjoyable weekend.